Okay.
All
Hello,
right.
everyone. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for coming. We are going to start our presentation with IAA, and they're going to talk about how to become a data scientist. I'm going to hand it out to Valerie, and she can go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Aja. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Val Schwartz. I'm the head of admissions at NC State University's Institute for Advanced Analytics. And with me today, I have 5 folks, 4 of whom are current students in our Master of Science in Analytics program, and another who is an alum of our program who is currently working as a data scientist. And today we thought we would talk with you all a little bit about some of the tools and the skills that we find most useful and that our budding data scientists find most useful in their work. And we also thought we could talk a little bit about the choice to go to graduate school, whether to do that right after undergrad, whether to wait and have some years of work experience under your belt before you go to graduate school. So we will kind of talk through those topics a little bit, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So with that, I thought I would just have each of our panelists introduce themselves. So I will go down the line just as you see them in order on this slide here. So Taylor, would you like to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Taylor Birch. As you can see, graduated from UNC last year in May. So proud alum, proud to be Tar Heel. Excited for football game today. But so I majored in statistics and analytics, and then minor in exercise and sports science, and just did the program after graduating.
All right, Megan, you're up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Chochi. I graduated from the University of Virginia in 2015. I majored in foreign affairs and French. So I worked for about 4 years before starting the program. Val, did you also want us to say our practicum or?
Oh, sure. You can mention which company sponsors your practicum sponsor.
Okay. And so I'm a current student in the program, and I am working on the Fifth Third Bank practicum project.
And Taylor, what's your practicum?
I am on the federal government agency team.
All right, Ruhi, you're next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ruhi. I graduated from the University of South Carolina last May with majors in international business, operations and supply chain, and statistics. So I went straight from undergrad into the MSA program, and I'm working on the Trillium Health Resources practicum team. They provide mental health services, or they facilitate mental health services in Eastern North Carolina.
Awesome. Lahari, you're up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lahari Ravuri. I graduated from NC State in 2019 with a degree in computer science, and I went straight into the MSA program at the Institute and graduated this past May. Currently, I'm working as a data scientist at Fifth Third Bank in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Awesome. And Mark, last but not least.
At least me. So my name is Mark Sine. I graduated from Binghamton University in 2014 with industrial systems and engineering. And then spent about 6 years in the workforce, including the last 3 were doing analytics at the United States Postal Service. And then made my way to the program where my practicum sponsor is SAS and Building Clarity. That's doing some work about sensors and intelligence in buildings.
Great. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. I thought first we could dive into the topic of why you decided to do a grad program and whether you decided to go straight from undergrad or whether you decided to work for a few years. So we can go down the line in kind of the same order. Do you want to just kind of talk a little bit about what influenced that decision for you?
Yeah, so for me, as a recent graduate, obviously right around the time when I was looking for a job and trying to decide what to do, all the COVID stuff hit. And so I think the first thing for me was definitely some uncertainty. And I had applied for a few jobs, mostly in the data science analytics realm. But I was finding that I didn't quite have the tools they were looking for. A lot of the different program languages they were using, or just a lot of techniques I hadn't had much exposure to in undergrad. And so looking at that and knowing that I wanted to go into one of those roles into the data science industry, this program was a perfect fit, sort of one, preparing me for a role like that and for making me a more competitive applicant in that industry, and then as well the kind of return on investment. And so I was kind of weighing, okay, I could go for a more entry level job and try to work my way in that way, or go to grad school, and then where you're obviously gonna have to pay, but after that, they've really prepared you well. And then one of the great things with the MSA program is that return on the investment, and it happens very quickly. I heard about the program from a talk that the director, Dr. Rappa, gave actually on UNC's campus last year. And that was one of like the main things he led with, was that he like what said in 18 to 24 months, like you'll get your money back basically. And so really that combined with knowing the reputation that MSA had for preparing scientists was why I kind of decided to go into the program rather than go straight into the job.
Megan, do you want to shed some light?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I have probably the opposite path. Like I mentioned, I graduated from the University of Virginia in 2015, and I did an undergraduate degree in the humanities. My interests have always been extremely broad, and I think my path between undergrad and now is a testament to that. I spent some time working in the service industry. I spent a year volunteering for a nonprofit in South Africa. I did a Fulbright grant in Brazil, and then I spent a little over 2 years working in Washington, D.C. before starting the program. So I am an advocate of taking some time off, exploring your interests, and finding out what you enjoyed and what you didn't enjoy. I think for me, that shed a lot of light. And at the end of the day, I had a winding path to get here, but what it came down to was I was actually working for a company in DC. It was a co-working space, and I got to meet a lot of people doing different things. And I got exposed to a lot of different companies who were using data and sort of blending my interest in foreign affairs with the power of data. And that was really interesting to me. And this particular company that I worked for owned a coding/data science bootcamp school. So I got access to doing some free courses. I started doing those in my free time. And the company actually ended up not doing so well financially, so I got laid off. But when I got laid off, that was a catalyst for me to go back to school. And by that time, having had a few years, tried a few different things, I really felt confident in my decision that that's what I wanted to do. So I started taking classes in my free time, learning statistics, learning linear algebra, and teaching myself Python. So, a bit of a winding path, but I'm grateful for the experiences that I had in between undergrad and grad school.
So,
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry. So I'm a bit more on Taylor's path in terms of I came straight out of undergrad. For me, I had actually decided to go to graduate school before the pandemic hit, so I was applying kind of in that fall semester. For me, it kind of had to do with when I was thinking about what I wanted my first couple of years out of undergrad, what I wanted that to include. I knew I wanted to eventually go for like a data science master's just because it kind of seemed like a natural evolution of what I had studied in undergrad. I had developed that interest in analytics, but I really didn't know what I wanted in terms of an analytics career. I just knew I was interested in the subject matter. So for me to go to a master's degree and be exposed to the different options within the field of analytics made me feel like when I was job searching, I would have a little bit more knowledge as to what it is I want, what types of paths I think could find interesting, being, I guess, equipped with the possibilities of analytics.
So for me, timeline-wise, my path towards getting to where I am now it looks pretty straightforward because I came right out of undergrad into the program and I have no regrets about my decision. I'm really happy with where I am. But I think when you kind of put a magnifying glass to it, I resonate a lot with what Megan said about exploring your interests before to make sure you know where you want to head. And that can change at any time, right? So for me, when I was my first year of undergrad and just early on in my like education at NC State, I really thought I wanted to do academic research in computer science. But when I actually pursued some research opportunities within it, and along with my minor in sociology, kind of pursued research opportunities in a couple different disciplines like social sciences, I realized that there were parts of that environment that I loved, like the problem solving, problem ideation, being able to like iterate on a problem and not know what the end goal is. I loved all of that, but the environment wasn't right for me. So that's when I started to think about transitioning away from computer science and academic research to industry and data science. So I probably wouldn't have gotten there if I hadn't put myself in positions where I could experience what I wanted to do in the future, or at least what I thought I wanted to do. So for me, it's definitely it's been a situation where I was able to do a lot of that exploration while I was in undergrad, but I have no doubts that in the future, continuously throughout my career, I'm going to have to do the same thing where I put myself in situations where I'm trying things that are new to see where I want to go next.
I guess that leaves me for the last story. So with my journey, I mentioned that I worked for the United States Postal Service for 5 years. The important thing there is we got the opportunity to see a lot of a massive organization, and I got to work my way up at headquarters and work with a lot of the higher up executives in a huge organization like that. And what you get to see is there is a lot of managers. There's a lot of people that work their way up into management eventually. And I kind of looked around and said, what sets me apart from this group of people in the future? If I need to go look for a job, if I want an opportunity, what is the thing that I have that's different besides being a manager? And analytics touches absolutely everything nowadays. You look around, and being in that spot, I saw how many different parts of our organization came to us asked for assistance with data, making decisions, all of that. So when you get to a certain level, having those tools in your tool belt to differentiate you, to lean back on and kind of make you different, having data analytics and specifically some experience with data science is something that really sets you apart. And it's always something that you can fall back on to help you make decisions going forward and just understanding the work that's going on in your organization. So that's kind of how I made my way from working analytics to trying to get more diverse.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing that. And I thought, would you mind kind of shifting gears a little bit now and talking a little bit about just sort of the nuts and bolts, the tools that you find useful? Students, I know you're still in the learning process, and Lahari, I know you're still in the learning process. As you just said, it's sort of an ongoing thing. I think data scientists, probably more so than a lot of other professions, are continually learning throughout their careers. But if you could all just shed a little bit of light on tools, skills that you think are sort of the most critical, both in the work that you're doing right now and what you anticipate you might be doing in the future. And maybe we can go in reverse order this time just to mix it up a little bit. So we can turn it back on you again, Mark.
Sure, I'll double down. So as far as skills go, obviously programming is something that's very important when you come into a program like this or data science in general. But what you really want to, or what I have really found valuable is kind of thinking about resiliency and realizing that you're not going to be you may not be the best at any one thing, but you can be good at a lot. And just going in with a mindset of, I'm going to learn, it's going to be tough, and I'm going to pick it up. I've kind of gathered from the networking that we've done too with professionals that mindset is one of the most important things that you can take forward, because you're going to do that in school. You're going to do that when you get out to work. Just know that working on those skills is a continuous work in progress, and always being hungry to learn more. You're never going to be done. So if you come in with an attitude like that, it's honestly the best tool that I've had so far.
So in terms of the underlying important soft skill, I do think resiliency, flexibility, adaptability, that's really important because, yeah, kind of going back to the first question, something we all mentioned is like the idea of continually learning. So yeah, absolutely. When thinking about things like programming languages, with a little bit of research, you can probably find kind of what the industry that you might have interest in uses in general. So for me in financial services, a large part of the bank is still restricted to using proprietary software because banks have a little bit more of compliance restrictions with lending and underwriting, for example. So software like SAS is really big. But certain analyst groups within the bank will use R or Python or other open source statistical programming languages because they find value in that and they are able to kind of mitigate the restrictions that other parts of the bank may have. And I'm sure that's true for every company that's out there. So what becomes more important is not necessarily knowing a specific programming language or a specific technique to like the nitty-gritty of it. It becomes more important to know the general application, the use cases of a tool, to know that if someone asks you to pick up a new language, you have the foundation the foundation or a game plan to learn it quickly, that you're flexible enough to adapt to new software or even like new statistical tools and techniques as they come out. So yeah, I'd say that there are like very specific things that you can learn and it's to your benefit, but also keep in mind that you want to always remember what the general goal is, which is getting better at like continually adapting yourself to a new situation.
Yeah, I guess I'll talk kind of in the same vein as what Mark and Lahari were talking about, but kind of just being able to learn how to learn, I think is really important because it's impossible to know every single like function of every single coding language for every single situation. And I don't think anybody expects you to have that. So just learning how to familiarize yourself with something new, I think helps when you're kind of faced in those new situations of, okay, I don't exactly understand this concept, but I know how I can understand it. And I think having that patience and having that ability to work through and troubleshoot things is something that's really useful.
Yeah, I echo what everyone before me said. If I'm guessing a lot of you, if you're at this event, already know how to code. But if you don't, I would say just start with one language. You don't feel like you need to learn R, Python, and SAS right from the get-go. I would say learn one language and learn it well, and then you can apply sort of like the foundational knowledge from there into other languages as you learn them. And yeah, we're all Googling all the time. So don't, like Ruhi said, you don't need to know everything. I think everyone who works as a data scientist relies heavily on Stack Overflow. In terms of soft skills, I would say that try not to lose sight of what you don't know now, what you don't know at the beginning, because a lot of what you'll need to do is explain what you've done to people who don't understand why you've done it or how you got to that conclusion. So just keeping sight of, really being able to communicate what you're doing to people who don't have the technical foundations will be really key and will be what sets you apart.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of say what Megan touched on at the end is that communication, I think, was something that I didn't foresee being such a big part of, I guess, a career as a data scientist, but also the program, especially. I actually started as a computer science major and I switched to statistics, so I had a heavy programming background before I even reached the end of my undergrad, and I felt very comfortable there. I felt very comfortable with statistics, but in our first couple of months, I was very challenged in terms of presenting and writing and things like that, where I was taking a lot of skills I had, but making them relatable to, like Megan said, someone who doesn't know what I've done, isn't experienced in data science. And really, I think one thing that I've learned, and it applies to almost the learning process as well, is being able to take a lot of information, whether it be data or a report or something you've read, and to consolidate it in a way that makes sense to both yourself and then someone you want to convey the information to. It's really easy to read a big article or to see a data set and to be overwhelmed by it and to be confused by it, but really taking the time to process all that data and to make the information relatable and make it kind of understandable, I think is really important, both for personal growth and for communicating findings or in a business context, in that setting.
Awesome. And I swear we're not paying them to say these things, but if I could have like asked them to say certain things, I think these would have been the things I would have asked for. So well done, panelists. We want to open it up to you all. What questions do you have for either the whole group or for any of our individual panelists about their experience, about tools and skills? It's wide open. Whatever you guys would like to discuss, we are here to address your questions. So you go ahead if you can use the chat function to send any questions you might have. And while you're warming up, let's just go down the line. What is each of your preferred coding language, or does it depend on the situation? Taylor, you can start.
I guess me first. My current preferred language is R. That's what we use mostly in the statistics department at UNC, so that's what I was most familiar with. So that's, I guess, mine.
Python for me. And I'm lucky my practicum project is actually in Python, so worked out well.
For me, I think it depends in terms of like what the situation is, because I learned R in a very like statistical kind of concept, and I learned Python more from that traditional programming, managing data concept. So it's kind of half and half, depends on the task is which language I'm more comfortable in.
So in undergrad, I was primarily working in Java, which is like not related to data science at all, but like I built an object-oriented programming foundation, but then I kind of left that behind when I came to the IA and I like worked entirely in R. But now at Fifth Third, I'm kind of back to my roots in Python and occasionally working in SAS when I need to for certain things. But yeah, I guess right now at the moment, Python.
And I'll echo that. I'm also Python, although I did mention my practicum sponsor is SAS, so doing a little bit of both of those things. But that kind of speaks to the fact that like you might have a favorite in one, but you can do all of them, and that's super important. So, but I picked Python.
All right, well, audience, please chime in with questions because I want to hear from you all what you want to know. But I have another one for the panelists. So for those unfamiliar with the Master of Science and Analytics program at NC State, it is a heavily collaborative, heavily team-based program. And the reason it is that way is because our understanding of professional data scientists is that they don't work in a vacuum, whether they are part of a giant team of data scientists at their organization or whether they're the lone data scientist and they're interfacing with other departments and other stakeholders. Being able to work effectively with other people is a huge part of the equation. And so I was wondering if panelists, if you could talk a little bit about the team experience, whether at the Institute or in work lives, or on specific projects, you name it. But if you could talk just a little bit about like some of the pros, some of the cons, if you have any sort of key lessons learned that you would want to share about what it means to be an effective team player. And we can start with, I guess, anybody, whoever wants to chime in, feel free to chime in.
I can start, I guess. So one thing that I really like about kind of how team-oriented the IAA is you never kind of feel alone when you're working through things or when you're troubleshooting. You're constantly bouncing ideas off of team members. You're like cementing each other's understanding. And then I guess it's like a pro and a con together is you kind of learn how to work with different people's working styles. And that can even be like a really small thing like this module. I am somebody that is not the nicest person before 9 a.m., but I'm working with all morning people. And so just learning how to be adaptable in those situations when, your team members work in a slightly different way, like how can you be a contributing member of the team? How can you adapt the way you work?
I think something that I noticed coming into the IAA was I'd always valued teamwork and working in team projects because I'm definitely like a maximizer sort of person. I only like doing what I do best, and I like other people picking up my weaknesses for me. So I love team projects for that reason, because I like that everyone can kind of go to the part of the project that they work best in, for example. But I'd always noticed that in volunteer work that I'd done in the past with groups of people or school projects that typically people don't take teamwork seriously. There's not really like a fair balance of work, or there's not really expectations that are set up front about what the team should work or function, and nothing about like working styles and preferences. We don't have those conversations. But coming to the IAA and then subsequently working at Fifth Third, I realized that like it's the norm when you're actually working is that people will ask you for that stuff up front, and they know and value what teamwork can do for a project or a company or the group as a whole. Kind of echoing a previous sentiment about you can't be the best at everything, that really comes into play here. You can't do all of the work for a project when you're in your job. You just can't. There's no way. So teams become vitally important. And so I think that what like the key takeaway for me doing practicum projects and homework teams at the IAA and like building up those skills was that you have to know what your strengths and weaknesses are and whether you want to like what you want to build up or focus on. That's something that's good to know up front, and knowing how to communicate that to other people is really important as well. If you're working on a team and no one starts that conversation about expectations at the beginning, you should be the one to do that. No one's going to blame you for it. No one's going to look at it or take it in a negative way. And then also, we talked a little bit about what you should do at the beginning of like working on a group project. At the end, feedback is so important, because if you didn't like something that happened and you don't share it with people, you're going to be stuck in the same cycle of like dealing with things that might not bother you at the beginning, but slowly grow in frustration and kind of eventually get to like a tipping point where you're not working as effectively as you could. So yeah, those are my takeaways from everything that I've learned in the IAA and then working the few months that I have at Fifth Third.
I'd like to add that in my undergrad experience, teamwork, if it was implemented, it was never implemented well, and not just for me, but I don't think I ever really had a group project that I enjoyed in undergrad, if I'm being honest with you. So that was actually something that I was really looking forward to in the Institute. And when I was choosing between various grad school offers, it was something that made the Institute stand out, both because of that and because of the cohort format. So in case you don't know, we actually all take all of the same classes together at the Institute. So, the faculty and has really thought about what we need to know and teaches you all of that. You're not just choosing which, course here and there. You take all of the same classes with everyone in your program. And I think that augments the teamwork so much, because everyone on your team is taking all of the same classes as you. And I think it really just creates a foundation of, like you're all going through the same thing together, so you can really lean on each other. So, sometimes I can explain something to my teammates, but most of the time they're there to help me explain things when I need it. And that's been really great. And the way the Institute has it set up is that everybody gets a chance for leadership in the program, which I think is really great. Everyone will either be a team lead for a practicum or a team lead for a homework team. And so everybody gets a chance to practice being a leader, practice putting in those norms that Lahari mentioned. And I just think it's a really great life skill, because after you leave school, it's something that'll serve you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I can kind of similar to Megan, I pretty much hated every team experience I had in undergrad for lots of reasons. Mostly because a lot of times I was in groups with people who didn't care at all, and you're doing all the work, or the fact that there is no structure. So like you can maybe take the lead, but like you want to look like you're like taking over and like controlling everything. So it was kind of a mess. And I knew applying to the IA that there was a lot of team stuff. I didn't know there was going to be this much team stuff, which at first I was kind of loathing and was not looking forward to. But as I've gotten into it, I recognized that one, not all teams were like the teams that I had in undergrad. So like the people in the program actually also care about what we're doing. And so it makes working with them a lot easier. And I'm not worried about having to do too much or like working with people that aren't concerned about what we're doing. But everyone at the IA is focused and is willing to work and willing to learn and grow. And so that's been a pleasant surprise for me, and kind of has shifted my view of teams. And also, one thing I've learned is that it's really important on whatever team you're going to, whether it be at the program or into a job or just in general, is getting to know the people on your team is work. Even if it takes extra time or it feels weird or we're all virtual, so we have to like hang out on Zoom or like maybe socially distance meet up in person. But it makes working together a lot easier because you're not looking at them as like the product of their work, but as like a person and as like someone who is trying and is wanting to grow. And so once you have that relationship and once you understand where you're coming from, it's a lot easier to work together. And like you don't get your feelings hurt as easily. You can give feedback and receive feedback a lot easier. So that's, I think, I've seen the value of teams through the program that definitely I would have avoided at all costs like 6 months ago, but now I'm very happy that it is the way it is.
Thank you all for that. So we have a few questions from the audience. Worth asked a really good question that I'm curious to hear how you all respond to. So he asked, for each panelist, what do you believe made you stand out compared to your peers that applied for the program? So I don't like to frame things so much as comparisons, but if each of you could just talk a little bit about what you think maybe perked up our ears during the admissions process. And obviously we think you're all wonderful. So I'll let you just kind of jump on, and whoever wants to chime in can chime in.
I would love to start with that question because I love the question. So part of what's awesome about the program is that they love finding people from all different backgrounds in terms of academic, cultural, like everything. So for me personally, I'd like to think I came in with a Lean Six Sigma black belt, industrial engineer, business experience analytics. Those probably were things that set me apart. But the really cool thing is it doesn't matter if I came from art history, it doesn't matter if I came from psychology, like whatever it is that makes you unique, that you're passionate about, and what makes you different, those are big things that the program look for. And if you can find what that thing is that you're really good at or you're really passionate about, and then frame it in a way that's relevant to the program, that's relevant to data, that's relevant to how you bring a different perspective to the program relative to anyone else, like that's what you really want to focus on, because that's what's really going to come through in the whole process. So that would be my advice.
I might keep that little snippet of recording, Mark, and just use it during admissions information sessions. So thanks. How about the rest of you?
I'm trying to think back to my admissions interview, and I think like one thing I noticed was at the very beginning of the interview, a lot of questions were kind of directed towards the comp sci background that I had, which I kind of expected because like I think there is a typical sentiment in general that like, oh, computer science is the same or lends itself very well to data science, which in ways it does, but the IA is a program that knows that's not the case. By the middle of like that session, I noted, like I had mentioned at some point that I didn't know that I wanted to do industry until like pretty late, which is why kind of all of my experience was academic research related. And that a lot of the like data science, like vaguely data science things that I knew came from working with a food bank through my sociology minor. Because I did a time series project for them at some point. And so I think that's like what made me stand out is the fact that there were some like typical experiences that I had through computer science, but then some atypical experiences that I had working in social sciences that lent itself pretty well to what the program was about, and also being able to emphasize that I did want a career in the industry because I had kind of experienced the opposite end of that, and I knew I didn't like it. The program typically like wants students that have career goals or aligned with their goals, and so I was able to demonstrate that by like talking about what I didn't like in undergrad.
I think another part of it is also just like being excited about the program and like being able to communicate that interest, and that like a genuine interest when you are applying and when you are interviewing. I was like really excited about the program, and so that's definitely something I talked about. I know Val says a lot that the program is very high touch, so you are very like involved with the faculty and staff, and so kind of wanting that involvement and seeking out that level of that kind of community that IAA classes tend to be, I think is an important part.
Yeah, I would agree with Ruhi. I think it goes both ways, right? I think it's important to show what you like about the program. Show that you've done your research, show that you know why you're interested in the IAA over other programs. For me, a lot of that was the practicum project. That's pretty unique to the IAA, and that was something that I talked a lot about. But then as I've mentioned, I come from a different background, and I think I leaned pretty heavily on that, which felt like a scary thing to do because I wasn't sure that the IAA was looking for people with such, I had only took statistics classes shortly before applying because I was interested. So, I really didn't think I was what they were looking for, but I leaned on my, what I studied in undergrad and how I wanted to apply, how I wanted to, sort of blend those interests with data science. So.
Yeah, I would say definitely like stick to what you're passionate about throughout the application process. Like they, yes, are looking for, I think, us to have some experience in programming or analytics. And if you don't have any, like take classes yourself. There's tons of stuff online that's like free where you can learn and just show that you have an interest and show that you are wanting to grow and that the IA can be that next step for you. And they're definitely wanting all types of people with different backgrounds. And like there are teachers and people who have been working for 20 years and people who have been like me, like working for no years. And they are definitely looking for not one specific thing. Like I think the questions they asked me in my interview, I didn't even really answer a lot about like my technical background, but just answered about the things I was passionate about, like working with teams. It was like it wasn't my experience working on like an analytics project. It was my experience working on like a team when I was for my job when I was like a manager for the basketball team. Like it was like I'm passionate about sports and I care about sports, and I wanted to talk about that and show them who I was more than like the things that made me a good data scientist. So I think definitely looking at those things, and you get, like they said, knowing why the program you think is a good fit for you and like why you want to be involved is important, because if you're kind of aimless and like you're like, yeah, I just applied because I thought it might be like a cool thing, but I'm not really sure about it, that's probably not a good stance to come. So definitely being specific and focused and just being true to who you are.
I think those are beautiful answers. Steve has a question that is super broad and could go a million directions, but I will let you all address it the way you wish. And he asks, if there was one thing you wished that you knew during your time as an undergrad, what would that be? Anyone who wants to take that first?
I can go quickly again because it's, I guess, pretty fresh for me. So the thing that I have struggled with the most is my learning and studying process, and that I definitely did most things in undergrad for a grade and a GPA and not to learn. And that was probably somewhat of some classes that I didn't think I was going to have to ever use again, which some of them are true, some are not. But I definitely had the wrong mindset in terms of what education and what learning is about. And when I got to the program, I realized that my brain was wired to just kind of get the minimum done and whatever I needed to do to get the right grade. And one good and bad thing about the institute is that the grades are kind of weird. Like you don't necessarily know what grade you're getting all the time. It might be like a check or a check plus, and you're like, is that an A? Is that a B? I don't know. And so that has helped me actually, I think, focus on like the process more and what like the work I'm doing and not the grade I'm receiving, which that's what the real world's about. Like you don't get grades for like business projects. You're producing a product that you put a lot of work into and that has real impact. And it's not like you get a check or a check plus for what you do. It's like, how does this measure up in the real world? And so I think shifting your mindset now as soon as possible to learning for the sake of like learning understanding rather than learning for the sake of getting a grade. I wish I would have done that long before the last 3 or 4 months. So I think that's really important.
For me, it would have been that did I cut somebody off?
No, keep going.
Okay, sorry about that. That there's no kind of one right way to do things. So I know that in undergrad, I spent like a lot of time just figuring out what it is I wanted to study. And I felt like I was wasting time when I was doing things that maybe weren't going to be related to my job because I didn't know what I was doing. And so I think I just had a lot of stress that the choices I was making weren't going to be the right choices when I did figure out what I was doing, but just kind of keeping in mind that those experiences, like you learn something from all of them. And so even looking back, the things that I did might have had not too much to do with data science, but they did in a very direct way lead me to data science. So like embrace, I guess, the path that you're on, because it can be so workable.
I'm really glad you started me off with that because I think you said, Ruhi, I think you said that better than I could. I did a lot of random things in undergrad that I didn't necessarily value to the fullest extent at the time. I had a social science minor and a humanities minor. I had a certificate in global perspectives because briefly I was really interested in getting better at intercultural communication. I did research in psychology and like education psychology and took a bunch of classes in cognitive psychology and like kind of got obsessed with that for a little bit. And I worked on a healthcare project with electronic health records. Like I did a bunch of stuff that was actually giving me a lot of information about different domains and different industries, but I didn't realize that at the time. I kind of felt like I was just jumping from one thing to another because I felt like, oh, comp sci is such a set path and data science is such a set path that like this is just me having fun. I took art classes and I was like, oh, this is just me having fun. But I wish at the time I had valued it for what it was, which was being able to, not only did I like build the skill of being able to adapt to a domain really quickly. So when I worked on that healthcare project, I like didn't know half the things that I do about like the industry that I do now, like compliance and HIPAA laws and all of that. Like I just didn't. But because I worked on that project, those were things that I picked up on. So looking back, I wish that I just put a little bit more time into reflecting on things that I didn't realize were helping me.
And real quick, just playing off what Taylor said with grades, because that's what came to my mind too. Shameless plug for a little bit of experience before the program was the right path for me because honestly, it felt like it kind of geared me towards why things matter and like thinking about how you're going to apply things. So like I'm learning this, how does it matter? Why does it mean more to me? And a lot of that stuff means a lot more when you can kind of apply it to business, but it kind of goes and applies in with what Taylor said about grades. Grades sound awesome, and coming out of undergrad, you're so used to looking at your grades, but with this, it's if you can really gear yourself to think about like, are you actually absorbing concepts? What are you actually learning? And then maybe even a little bit of thought process on what could possibly be applied in the future, because you're going to have a whole new learning experience when you get on the job. Grades matter, but they're not the biggest thing. So just try to keep different perspectives in play when you're studying and learning.
Kind of a different answer from everyone else, but I would just say that I wished I had known more about failure in undergrad. You will apply to many more jobs than you get offers for. You will get rejected from things that you really wanted. And it's going to hurt, but no one tells you that that's normal. Everyone just talks about their successes. And I think it's important to learn that all the people that you see who are successful also failed, also got rejected for jobs. But like I said, people never told me about that or warned me about it. So I think it's really important to learn that everybody's going through it, and what really matters is how you handle it, and that you don't let it discourage you, and that you just take it as, okay, what can I do from here? Like, how can I grow from this experience? And it can be applying to a job, or it can be something as little as like, my code has so many bugs that I don't know what to do. Like, don't let yourself get so discouraged. Just figure out what you need to do to go from there.
If we had like reaction symbols in here, I would throw up little praise hands for everything that you all just said. So yes. And then last question from the audience, which should work out perfectly time-wise, I think, is from Katie, who wants to know, how do the leadership skills you learn at the IAA translate to your place in the workforce once you graduate? And even those of you who are current students, I think you can probably extrapolate a little bit about that. So have at it.
I think for me, with like going back to that idea of teamwork and the experience that you get in as a team member that has to have leadership skills like good communication, honesty, flexibility, and as a homework team lead or a practicum team lead, I think I don't know how to say this. It's like realizing that you're not going to be good at it once you first start doing it, no matter how enthusiastic you are about it. Like I said before, I was really amped about being on a good team finally, and I love like team projects, but I definitely wasn't the best homework team lead when that time came around for me, even though I had been in homework teams and like recognized good skills and bad skills from other people who are learning alongside me. I think the translation is like that idea of being able to like pick up on what you're doing well and like reflect on what you're doing as you learn like soft skills that have a name to them. Like all of these words that we've been dropping throughout this presentation. As you pick up those skills, there's an element of you need to reflect at some point on how well this is all working for you. And that's something that's kind of formalized in the workplace because you have discussions with your manager pretty regularly. Like I have a weekly 30-minute call with my manager where we like talk about just this. We have like end of the month or end of the quarter reviews, performance reviews, and so part of it is formalized, but I think just the idea of reflection is really important in carrying this out successfully.
Yeah, and building off of that, it's very interesting in that I would bet a lot of people in the audience and most everyone in the program have been leaders in a lot of what they do up until they get to the program. And then once you get here, you're in a program with a bunch of people that are at the top of what they do. They're extremely hyper intelligent. A bunch of them are leaders also. So it's kind of humbling that you get an experience to fulfill the role of follower. And like, are you good at that? Can you let someone else lead? Can you watch how they lead? And then when you get to go through all this followership, I think the biggest thing you can take out of, and what we've been learning in some of our leadership classes, is that you might be a really good leader, but you might be really good at one leadership style. And once you get to be a leader in industry, you need to be able to be adaptable. You need to be able to support some people more than others, direct people more than others, and just kind of be flexible in how you lead your people. So that's a really big thing, is you get the opportunity to see all the different kinds of leadership, work on yourself as a follower, and then pair both of those things together when you go into the workforce.
I agree with you a lot, Mark. I'm a current practicum team lead, but I've actually really enjoyed learning from my homework team leads. I enjoy, both what's going well and what's, things that they're doing that I realize that I'm also doing that I would like to correct for. So I really enjoyed that, actually. And I think one thing that the Institute really stresses is being vulnerable as a leader. And that's been really important because just because I'm leading the practicum team doesn't mean that I know everything, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So it's really taught me just how to tell my team when I don't know what to do and lean on their strengths. And like Mark said, there's a lot of leadership training that goes into working on examining our teammates and meeting them where they are in terms of leadership. And that's something I'm still working on. Everyone on my team is different, has different skill sets, is at different phases in their life. So, it feels like a work in progress, just trying to match my leadership to what each of them needs and not sort of a preset idea of what I think leadership should be.
For me, I'm a pretty right-brained person. So I was definitely growing up in an undergrad, that person that kind of rolled their eyes when people talked about management and team function and leadership things. But what I've kind of realized in the IAA is it's not it's a framework to help you. It gives you the terminology to talk about your experiences and to reflect on your experience to actually be able to learn from them. So that way, after you're working in a group project or after you are in a leadership position, you can look back on it and not just say, well, that went great, or that was awful. You understand, okay, well, I was supporting when maybe I should have been directing, and you have those terms and you have that way of thinking about it. So even if it's not a very hard concept, it's useful in terms of being able to actually grow from all of your experiences, not just continue experiencing the same thing over and over.
Yeah, I think the value, especially being at the Institute, when it comes to leadership, is definitely seeing the leadership styles of everyone else around you and taking away and learning from the things that they do really well and applying that to your own leadership. My first homework team lead, she was a mother of a 10-year-old, who is starting back school, and she was managing so many things. I thought the program was hard, and I thought that I was stressed out and busy, and here she is a single mom, parenting a child who is adjusting to virtual school and also managing the program at the same time. My mind was blown. I was like, how are you doing this? You're a superhero. But it taught me sacrifice and dedication and things like that. She gave up a lot to help us out as a team. And so learning from her and learning from others in that way is great. And then another thing that I have taken away too is leading is normally looked at vertically. There's a boss and there's their employees, but you can also lead horizontally. So you can lead amongst your peers and amongst your group. And that looks like a lot of different things. But in our situation, I think it's things volunteering if you understand the concept well, and you're volunteering, say, hey, if any of you you need help or would want to work time or study sometime, I'd be willing to host a review session or something like that. And that's giving of your time as a leader, and you're not maybe in a leadership position and you're not tasked with leading a group, you can still lead. So that is something that I heard in one of our leadership classes, and that has really stuck with me, is that you can lead from no matter where you are, because you're not gonna immediately go into a leadership role and a job. That's not realistic. So definitely leading no matter where you are and when you are.
I'd just like to note that I was a homework lead with Ruhi, so I was a little nervous for her answer.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. That timing worked out perfectly. Just a couple minutes until 4 o'clock. We can hang out for a little bit longer if anyone has any lingering questions, but otherwise, thank you all for your time and your attention this afternoon. We appreciate it. And thank you, panelists.
Good luck with your presentations tomorrow. I hope they go well.
There's a Fifth Third fan. Did you see that?
I know.